Hardening Microsoft 365 starts with three practical questions. What does good look like? Where are we today? And which gaps create the most risk? In this module, we'll connect baselines, secure score, and gap assessment into a prioritization workflow you can use to drive remediation. We've already looked at the Microsoft 365 security landscape and the zero trust principles behind it. Verify explicitly, use least privilege, and assume breach. Now we make that strategy measurable. Baselines, secure score, and gap assessment help identify priorities and turn security intent into practical remediation. A security baseline is the agreed target for how Microsoft 365 should be configured across identities, devices, data, and workloads. A gap assessment compares today's tenant against that target and shows what needs attention. Microsoft Secure Score helps by highlighting recommendations, but it is not the full maturity story. Real hardening comes from deciding which gaps matter most, which fixes are technically realistic, and whether the organization is ready to operate the controls consistently. That is what turns strategy into an actionable remediation plan. Microsoft Secure Score turns security configuration into an improvement signal. It reviews recommended actions across Microsoft 365 areas such as identity, devices, apps, collaboration, and data protection. Each action has points based on Microsoft's estimate of security impact, so stronger controls generally raise the score. But the number is tenant-specific. It changes as products are enabled, settings change, and recommendations evolve. Use Secure Score to help decide what to improve next, not as proof that risk has been fully measured or eliminated. Recommendations become useful when they are treated as managed work items. For each improvement action, ask, does it apply to our environment? Who owns it? What risk does it reduce? And what must be true before we implement it? Enabling MFA may be straightforward. Blocking legacy authentication or enforcing device compliance may require licensing checks, user impact analysis, and a phased rollout. Status labels like completed, planned, not applicable, or accepted risk create accountability. And the score is only the starting point. Validate the control through configuration review, reporting, and operational testing. Not every Secure Score recommendation can be implemented immediately. Start by identifying the control, then assess the business and technical impact. If it cannot be implemented now, document the exception, why it is needed, who owns the risk, what compensating controls exist, and when it will be reviewed. Approval should come through governance, not an informal technical decision. Common reasons include application compatibility, user disruption, licensing gaps, or operational readiness. Most importantly, exceptions must expire or be revalidated, so temporary risk does not become a permanent insecure configuration. Secure Score is more useful when you look at movement over time and carefully against peers. Peer benchmarks can show whether you are ahead or behind similar organizations, but tenant size, licensing, industry risk, and business priorities can make comparisons imperfect. Trend analysis is often more actionable. It shows whether controls are improving, stalled, or slipping. Still, a higher score does not prove that critical risks are gone. Validate the trend with incidents, audit results, control maturity, and current threat intelligence. Microsoft guidance is one of the strongest inputs for a Microsoft 365 security baseline because it comes directly from the services you are configuring. Secure Score helps prioritize tenant-specific gaps. Defender, Entra, Intune, and Purview add recommendations for identity, endpoints, data, and threat protection. Published baselines and Microsoft Learn guidance help turn those recommendations into repeatable standards. The key is not to copy every suggestion blindly. Evaluate recommendations against risk, licensing, operations, and business needs, then define a secure target state that can evolve with threats and platform capabilities. Microsoft recommendations are a strong starting point, but they are not the whole baseline. CIS benchmarks add prescriptive hardening guidance, including practical configuration levels for Microsoft 365. Regulatory requirements add obligations around identity, logging, data protection, retention, and access governance. Industry standards raise the bar further for sectors like healthcare, finance, government, or defense. The goal is to combine these sources into one defensible baseline, so security settings align not only to Microsoft best practice, but also to audit expectations and organizational risk. To be usable, a baseline has to translate guidance into your organization's standard. What must be configured, which exceptions are approved, who owns each control, and how compliance is validated. That target state should reflect real context. Executives, administrators, frontline staff, and external collaborators may need different controls because their access, devices, and workflows differ. Document those differences intentionally instead of handling them as one-off decisions. Mature standards are version-controlled, reviewed on a regular cycle, and connected to governance, so the baseline stays current as risk, technology, and business needs change. A gap assessment turns security requirements into executable work. Begin by defining exactly what is in scope: workloads, users, admin roles, data types, and control families. Then collect evidence from the tenant using portals, PowerShell, graph, reports, logs, and tooling. Compare the current state against the approved baseline and classify each difference by risk, impact, and effort. The output should not be a vague findings report. It should be a remediation backlog with owners, dependencies, dates, and validation criteria. Closure only counts when the control is retested and the evidence proves the gap is resolved. Evidence collection should be repeatable, not just a set of screenshots. Start in the admin center for quick visibility. Then confirm critical settings with stronger sources such as PowerShell, Microsoft Graph, audit logs, and exported policies. For example, export conditional access policies, review MFA registration, check legacy authentication sign-ins, and validate Defender policy assignments. Capture the control state, affected users, exclusions, assignments, and last modified dates. Most importantly, prove enforcement. A policy that exists but misses the target population or is blocked by an exclusion is still a gap. Once gaps are identified, the key question is not simply, what can we fix? It is, what reduces the most risk for the organization? Start with areas where compromise would be most damaging, such as privileged access, identity, email, and sensitive data. Then weigh exploit likelihood, business impact, effort, and dependencies. A control may be high value but still require licensing, architecture changes, or behavior change, which affects timing. This approach helps teams separate quick wins from strategic projects, defend their roadmap, and explain why some items move now while others are sequenced later. Findings create value only when they become a sequenced plan. Start with quick wins, changes that are low effort but reduce real risk, such as blocking legacy authentication or tuning critical alerts. Then move into foundational controls, including identity governance, privileged access, device compliance, Defender baselines, and logging. As those stabilize, improve operations through monitoring, response playbooks, access reviews, change control, and exception handling. Finally, plan larger architecture work such as segmentation, application modernization, data governance, and automation. The goal is momentum now, with a path to sustainable hardening. The main lesson is that Microsoft 365 hardening becomes practical when it is measurable. Secure Score helps prioritize, but it is not the whole risk picture. Baselines should reflect Microsoft guidance, CIS, compliance needs, and internal standards. Gap assessments should produce evidence, owners, timelines, and validation. Next, we'll connect those plans to licensing and the capabilities available in the tenant.